Flying from London to New York?
Yeah.
Okay, but doing it without burning any fossil fuels, that feels like pure science fiction almost, doesn't it?
It really does.
But that's exactly what we're plunging into today. This incredibly ambitious goal of zero-carbon transatlantic flight.
Yeah, and it's a deep plunge. We're talking about the progress, the massive hopes, but also, the very real hurdles that are still there.
Especially focusing on the Freedom Flight Prize as a kind of catalyst for all this.
What grabs you first is just the sheer scale of it, I think. This isn't about small adjustments.
Well,
it's a total rethink of how we power these long-haul flights. A huge, huge challenge.
exactly. And to help us get our heads around it, we're really digging into this report, Zero Carbon Transatlantic Flight, an update on ambition, progress, and persistent challenges, 2024-2025. It's by Adrian Igor at Carbon Footprint Ltd.
A really comprehensive look.
Yeah, think of this as your way to get the essential facts, maybe some surprising bits, and understand the big obstacles in this. Well, vital effort. Our mission today, extract the core insights, get a clear picture of where we stand right now.
And it matters, right? I mean, considering the climate situation, tackling long-haul aviation emissions is just essential. It's a big piece of the puzzle.
Which leads us straight to the Freedom Flight Prize. Launched back in September 2020 by Carbon Footprint Ltd. What's the basic idea here?
Well, fundamentally, it's a competition. It's designed to spark the very first zero-carbon emission transatlantic flight, carrying over 100 passengers, crucially, and powered entirely by renewable energy.
Wow.
But the real kicker isn't just the flight itself. It's a whole process.
Yeah.
Design, build, and then successfully fly London to New York and back.
So a round trip, not just a one-way stunt. And the performance metrics are pretty tight, too.
They are, yeah. And that's deliberate. Each leg, so London, New York, and New York, London, has to be under 10 hours.
Okay. Comparable to now.
Right. But here's the really tough part. The return flight has to take off within 24 hours of the first leg starting.
Ooh, okay.
That puts enormous pressure on refueling or turning the aircraft around super quickly. A major challenge with potentially new energy systems.
So what kind of energy are we talking about? You said 100% renewable, zero in-flight CO2.
Precisely. The prize rules specifically call out hydrogen.
Right.
That could be gaseous, liquid, or even the sort of hydrogen slush.
Slush hydrogen. Okay.
Yeah. And that hydrogen could be used either directly in combustion engines or in fuel cells to generate electricity. Other renewable energy storage methods charged by renewables are also allowed.
Now, something interesting, you mentioned sustainable aviation fuels. CAFEs, they're not eligible. Why is that?
Yeah, that's a really key distinction. Look, HEFIS is incredibly important for cutting emissions in the near to midterm.
Absolutely.
But it still releases CO2 when it's burned in the engine. The Freedom Flight Prize is laser focused on the next generation, the truly zero in-flight emission solutions.
Pushing beyond the current best thing.
Exactly. It's aiming past those incremental steps.
And there's a decent prize pot involved.
Well, the goal is a multi-million-pound prize. They're aiming for potentially over 10 million funded through sponsorships.
Wow.
But honestly, even if it's just 1 million pound, that's still a massive incentive. Not just the cash, but the prestige, the history.
The bragging rights.
Totally. And the commercial edge. The founder, John Buckley, put it nicely. The prize puts 100% renewable flights right in the spotlight to address the climate emergency.
Makes sense. So where are things now? Is anyone actually close to winning this thing?
The prize website has this timeline graphic. It sort of suggests a potential win around 2029.
Okay.
But you should probably take that as more illustrative of the ambition rather than a hard deadline.
Got it.
The latest update on their site from March 2024 actually talked about expert views on making liquid hydrogen at the airport, which highlights one of the big practical hurdles.
Yeah, it really sounds like those technical demands, 100 plus people, transatlantic range, zero CO2, and that super fast turnaround there deliberately set incredibly high. It's meant to force the innovation.
Exactly right. The report calls it a visionary goalpost. It's designed to push the industry to really tackle these huge challenges head on.
Okay, so even though SAF isn't eligible for the Freedom Flight Prize itself, it's clearly, central to the whole decarbonization conversation right now. The report gets into that too.
It does, and it has to. SF is, right now, the most significant opportunity we have to cut aviation's carbon footprint using the planes we already have.
Right.
We've seen some decent growth in production lately, but there are definitely some major scaling challenges.
Okay, let's break this down. What's the latest on SAF production volumes and the policies trying to ramp it up?
Well, global production tripled in 2023, hit about 600 million liters.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, and the forecast for 2024 was for it to more than double again to maybe 1.25 billion liters. But context is key here. That's still only about 0.3% of global jet fuel demand. Tiny fraction.
Wow. All right.
The projection for 2025 is maybe 2.7 billion liters, so about 0.7% of demand. IAT, the Airline Association, they've actually flagged concerns about how slow the ramp-up is. Potential delays in new U.S. facilities could push expected volumes into 2025.
So even with all the talk and targets, getting enough SAF into planes is proving tricky. The report mentioned a potential disconnect between ambition and the reality on the ground.
That's a good way to put it. If you were hoping for a guilt-free transatlantic flight in, say, 2030, the odds of it running purely on SAF are still pretty slim based on current trajectories.
So demand, or at least the need, is way ahead of supply.
Way ahead, and that's where policy steps in. The EU has its Refuel EU mandate starting this year, 2025.
Right.
Requires a minimum SAF blend, and that percentage climbs steadily towards 2050. The UK's got a similar mandate kicking off now, too.
And other places.
Oh, yeah. Singapore, Japan, Norway have targets or mandates. Brazil, India, Malaysia, Indonesia are looking at it or starting implementation. Globally, ICAO aims for a 5% cut in fuel carbon intensity by 2030 using SAF.
Seems like broad agreement on SAF's importance, but actually making enough is the bottleneck.
That's the crux of it. Projections suggest we'll need about 17 million tons a year by 2030.
Okay.
But planned production capacity by the end of 2024 was only around 11.3 million tons per year. Big gap.
And how is this stuff actually made? The report mentioned EFA and PTL.
Right. So AFA is the dominant method right now. It uses things like used cooking oil, animal fats, greases.
Waste products.
Yeah. It's the most mature technology, generally the cheapest way to make SAF today. But there's a limit to how much of that sustainable waste feedstock is actually available.
Scalability issue.
Big time. And that's why these other pathways, especially power to liquid or PTL, are so critical for the longer run.
PTL, that's using renewable electricity to make hydrogen, then combining it with captured CO2 to make essentially synthetic jet fuel.
You got it. Renewable electricity, water for hydrogen, captured CO2. You basically manufacture fuel.
Sounds futuristic.
It is, and it offers huge scale potential without relying on limited biomass feedstocks. But the catch is cost.
Oh.
It's very energy intensive, needs massive amounts of cheap renewable power for the hydrogen part, plus efficient CO2 capture. Big capital costs for the plants, too.
Hurdles.
Definitely. But we are seeing policy support starting to emerge, like the UK's specific sub-target for PTL. And major players are investing by Boeing put money into Norsk eFuel. Startups like Spark eFuels and OXCCU are pushing the tech forward, too.
It feels like scaling up eSAF isn't just a tech problem, it's a massive investment problem.
Huge. The report estimates needing something like $19 to $45 billion in capital just to meet the 2030 targets.
Wow.
And attracting that kind of money is tough. Investors see risks changing policies, volatile SAF prices, tech maturity questions, feedstock security.
Plus, these projects take a long time to pay back.
Exactly. Compared to traditional oil and gas exploration, which, by the way, still gets way more financing than the entire aviation energy transition needs.
Right.
Well, SAF projects look less attractive on paper.
So airlines might say they're committed, but maybe aren't putting big money into production themselves yet.
The report kind of suggests that. Lots of confidence expressed about meeting 2030 goals, but maybe fewer feel fully prepared for the actual challenges.
Interesting.
Airlines seem to have invested less directly in SAF production compared to, say, the aircraft manufacturers or specialist developers. More of a wait and see, maybe.
So what levers are being pulled to try and close that investment gap?
All sorts. Government grants, support from development banks, loan guarantees, direct equity stakes, long-term purchase agreements, offtake agreements, they call them.
Okay.
Things like book and claim systems, private equity, green bonds. Blended finance is a big one, mixing public and private money to lower the risk.
Anything particularly innovative?
The UK's planned revenue certainty mechanism is getting attention. It basically guarantees a minimum price for SAF producers, specifically targeting the non-HEFA types like PTL. That really helps de-risk the investment.
Makes sense.
IATA is also trying to connect buyers and sellers with their SAF registry and matchmaker platform.
So it's clear that just telling airlines they have to use AF isn't enough. You need these financial carrots and sticks to make the supply actually happen affordably.
That's the core message, I think. You need both the demand signal from mandates and the supply-side confidence from these financial de-risking policies. It's a complex interplay.
Okay, so ASAV, the big focus for now, the next decade or so.
Mm-hmm.
But looking further out to those truly zero-emission options, the report dives deep into hydrogen propulsion.
It does. And hydrogen is definitely seen by many as the leading long-term contender for hitting that zero CO2 goal in flight. Two main approaches being explored.
Which are?
Using hydrogen in fuel cells to generate electricity for motors.
Okay, hydrogen electric.
And actually burning hydrogen directly in modified jet engines. Hydrogen combustion.
Let's take fuel cells first. What are the big players like Airbus doing there?
Airbus has made a really major strategic bet on hydrogen fuel cells. It's the core of their Zero program for the long haul.
Why fuel cells specifically?
They've had success with a pretty powerful 1.2 megawatt prototype fuel cell system they developed, plus advancements in storing liquid hydrogen, which is tricky stuff, very cold. They talk about it potentially revolutionizing air transport. Big words.
Sounds ambitious.
Yeah.
But the timelines have shifted a bit, haven't they?
They have. The original goal was entry into service around 2035. Now they're saying more like 2040 to 2045.
Why the delay?
It comes back to infrastructure, mainly. Airbus themselves say you need the whole hydrogen ecosystem: green production, transport, storage, airport refueling. Plus, right now, hydrogen just isn't cost competitive with S or kerosene, and the regulations for hydrogen planes aren't fully baked yet.
So the tech might be progressing, but the world around it needs to catch up. Did they cancel any test programs?
Yeah, plans for using a big A380 as a flying testbed got shelved, but they stress they're still fully committed to hydrogen.
What are they focusing on now, then?
A lot of R&D on the fuel cell stacks themselves, making them more powerful and efficient. Big focus on liquid hydrogen storage and distribution. They're working with Air Liquid on that, aiming for ground tests in 2027, developing the high-power electric components needed, and pushing for regulations.
Any new concepts?
They showed a notional design recently. 4 electric engines, about 2 megawatts each, every engine getting power from its own fuel cell system, and a pair of liquid hydrogen tanks.
Interesting. Now, besides Airbus's big vision, there are others like ZeroAvia taking maybe a different tack with hydrogen.
Absolutely. ZeroAvia's focus is quite different. They're targeting retrofitting existing regional aircraft smaller planes with hydrogen electric systems.
And they're making progress.
Really notable progress, yeah. Their first system, the ZA600 for planes up to maybe 20 seats, they've submitted certification applications in both the US and UK.
When might that be certified?
Potentially late 2025 or early 2026, based on their targets. The FAA even issued something called a G1 issue paper for their electric propulsion system. That's a key step in defining how it gets certified.
Have they flown it much?
Yeah, they completed 14 test flights on their Dornier 228 test aircraft. That program, High Flyer 2, even won an award.
And they're aiming bigger, too. A ZA2000 system.
Yes, that's for the 40 to 80 seat regional planes. Certification target there is around 2027, with potential entry into service in 2028.
What's the status?
Ground testing of the key bits is underway: the fuel cells, the cryogenic tanks for liquid hydrogen, the electric motors and power systems. Alaska Airlines is providing a Dash 8400 turboprop to be the flying test bed for that larger system. Ground and flight tests on that are expected to start within about 2 years.
Sounds like they're getting real traction. The report mentioned orders and partnerships.
Huge interest. They claim nearly 3,000 pre-orders for their systems. And partnerships with big names like Textron Aviation, Alaska Airlines, ASL Aviation Holdings, EcoJet. Even KLM is planning a demo flight with their tech in 2026.
Any other strategic moves?
Yeah. Interestingly, since April 2024, they started offering their core components, motors, inverters, fuel cells, for sale separately.
Selling the building blocks.
Exactly. They already made their first sale of a 600 kilowatt system in early 2025. That could really help spread the technology faster.
So fuel cells look promising, especially maybe starting smaller and scaling up. What about the other hydrogen route, just burning it in engines?
Right. Hydrogen combustion, while maybe not Airbus's top priority, research is definitely happening. A big milestone was achieved in December 2024.
What was that?
The world's first actual in-flight measurements of contrails produced by hydrogen combustion.
Contrails. The white trails behind planes. Why measure hydrogen contrails specifically?
Well, burning hydrogen mainly produces water vapor, unlike kerosene, which also produces soot, so the contrails are expected to be different.
Also,
Models suggest you might get fewer, but larger ice crystals. And potentially, these contrails might last for a shorter time or have less of a warming effect on the atmosphere. But these were just models.
so these tests were about getting real data.
Exactly. They used a modified glider with a small hydrogen engine and a chase plane full of instruments flying through the plume. They managed to generate measurable contrails on several flights, so now scientists are analyzing the ice crystal properties, the gases, aerosols. First real-world look.
Fascinating. And what about the engine makers themselves? Are they adapting engines for hydrogen?
Oh, yes. Safran and Turbotech ground-tested a small engine running on gaseous hydrogen. Rolls-Royce is gearing up for ground tests using liquid hydrogen on a modified Pearl 15 engine. Pratt & Whitney Canada is involved in a project looking at hydrogen combustor technology.
What's the main challenge for the engines?
Adapting the components, especially the combustor and fuel systems, to handle hydrogen, which burns very differently from kerosene and much faster, hotter. Ensuring it burns stably and efficiently is key.
Okay, we've talked tech, fuel cells, combustion. But the report keeps coming back to infrastructure and regulations as major roadblocks.
It's absolutely fundamental. Like Airbus found, you can have the plane tech, but without readily available green hydrogen and the whole airport setup, you're stuck.
What does that involve?
Massive investment. You need more renewable energy to make the hydrogen green in the first place. Then liquefaction plants, transport networks, storage facilities, and completely new airport refueling systems designed for cryogenic liquids.
Super cold stuff.
Exactly. Handling liquid hydrogen safely and quickly is a big engineering challenge. Many think generating the liquid hydrogen right there at the airport might be the key enabler.
Sounds like a classic chicken and egg situation.
Yeah.
No planes without fuel, no fuel infrastructure without planes demanding it.
Precisely. But efforts are underway. Airbus has its Hydrogen Hubs at Airports program, working with over 200 airports. ZeroAvia is partnering with specific airports, energy firms like Shell, and regulators like the UK CAA's Hydrogen Sandbox to work on refueling standards.
And the rule book.
It's evolving. The FAA put out a big hydrogen-fueled aircraft safety and certification roadmap late last year. The UK's Sandbox is active, but we're still a way off comprehensive, globally agreed standards for hydrogen aircraft.
It seems like the progress path is clearer, maybe faster, for those smaller regional hydrogen planes ZeroAvia is working on compared to the big transatlantic ones.
That's a very fair observation. Initial adoption is much more likely in those regional niches where you can maybe build dedicated infrastructure at a few key airports.
Right.
Getting hydrogen ready for transatlantic routes, the Freedom Flight prize goal, that requires overcoming these systemic hurdles, infrastructure costs, global regulations. It's a much bigger lift.
Okay, so hydrogen looks like the main long-term bet for zero-emission transatlantic, but with major hurdles.
Yeah.
What about electric flight using batteries or hybrid electric? Any chance they could do the transatlantic job?
Well, electric and hybrid electric are definitely making strides, particularly for reducing emissions on shorter flights. It all hinges on batteries, motors, power electronics.
And battery tech has been improving, hasn't it? The report mentioned some big numbers for energy density.
It has some really impressive figures coming out of labs in early production. NASA's SABRES program is aiming for potentially over 500 watt-hours per kilogram with advanced solid-state batteries.
Wow.
Companies like Amprius are already selling cells in the 450-500 weight Curie range using silicon anodes. Factorial Energy has validated solid-state cells around 375 weight Curie shear green for cars. These are big jumps from just a few years ago.
What does that mean for flying, practically?
It's enabling progress on smaller electric and hybrid aircraft. You've got Heart Aerospace with their 30-seat ES-30 hybrid regional plane. They're planning the first flight of their all-electric demonstrator this year, and they have serious airline orders.
But not all smooth sailing.
No. Aviation's Alice, that 9-seater all-electric commuter, their program is paused right now while they look for more funding. That really highlights the financial hurdles. And ATR's plan for a hybrid successor to their turboprops got pushed back 5 years to 2035. Developing those megawatt-class hybrid systems is complex.
So, good progress for shorter hops. But what about the Freedom Flight Prize's Transatlantic Challenge? Can batteries handle that?
Honestly, not even close. Not with current or projected technology. For a large plane, 100-plus passengers, London to New York, The sheer weight of batteries required would be astronomical. Even at 500 waste kilograms, it's just not feasible with current aircraft designs.
How much better would they need to be?
Probably an order of magnitude better, like 10 times the energy density, before pure battery electric becomes even thinkable for that kind of mission. It's a fundamental physics problem right now.
Okay, so pure electric is out for the prize. What about hybrid electric? Could that cross the Atlantic?
Theoretically, yes. A hybrid system combining batteries and electric motors with an engine burning fuel, probably SAF could achieve transatlantic range. But it wouldn't meet the Freedom Flight Prize rule of zero CO2 emissions during flight because you're still burning fuel.
Right, got it.
So realistically, the focus for battery electric and hybrid electric remains firmly on shorter ranges. Urban air taxis, commuter routes, regional flights. Great potential there, but not for the FFP challenge itself.
So we keep coming back to hydrogen as the most plausible, though challenging, path to the prize. But the report also talked about changing the shape of the plane itself, novel configurations. How does that fit in?
Hugely important. Just improving the engines or switching fuels isn't enough. Making the aircraft itself more aerodynamically efficient is crucial. And this is where concepts like the blended wing body or BWB get really interesting.
BWB, that's the one that looks kind of like a flying wing where the body and wings merge.
Exactly. No separate tube and tail. It's a very different shape.
What are the advantages?
Potentially much better aerodynamics, higher lift-to-drag ratio, which means it needs less energy, less fuel burn, but critically for hydrogen.
Ah, the storage issue again.
Yes. BWBs naturally have a lot more internal volume compared to a tube and wing plane. And since liquid hydrogen needs about 4 times the volume of kerosene for the same energy,
the BWB is a much better shape to hold all that bulky hydrogen fuel.
Precisely. Studies suggest that switching to hydrogen might actually impose less of an energy penalty on a BWB design compared to a traditional plane, especially with advanced hydrogen tanks integrated into the structure.
Is this just theoretical, or is work happening?
Oh, it's very active. NASA has researched BWBs for years. Now you have startups like JetZero making serious headway. They're developing a BWB airliner aiming for 50% less fuel burn.
Who are they working with?
They've partnered with EasyJet to look at hydrogen integration, and crucially, they got a big $235 million contract from the U.S. Air Force to build a full-scale BWB demonstrator.
Military interest, too.
Definitely. Potential for tankers or transports. Airbus has also explored BWB concepts for their hydrogen plans. There's real momentum.
So BWB could be key for making long-haul hydrogen flight practical. What are the holdups?
The main technical challenges have always been things like designing a pressurized cabin that isn't a simple cylinder and ensuring stable flight control without a traditional tail. But the level of investment and progress suggests these are seen as solvable problems now.
Beyond BWB, any other big aerodynamic or material innovations to watch?
Loads. Airbus is looking at longer, thinner wings, maybe even folding tips. Boeing is flight testing that transonic truss-braced wing on the X-66A very long. Skinny wings supported by struts for drag reduction.
Engines.
Engine makers are developing open fan or open rotor designs like CFM's RISE program, promising maybe 20% better efficiency. And materials science keeps advancing lighter, stronger composites to cut weight. Plus, that whole area of understanding and reducing non-CO2 effects like contrails is getting much more focus.
It really feels like you need breakthroughs on all fronts, doesn't it? Propulsion, fuel, and the aircraft shape itself.
Absolutely. The real magic happens when you combine them. Imagine a highly efficient BWB airframe designed from the ground up to run on clean hydrogen. That's where the transformative potential lies. Getting the BWB tech proven and manufacturable is a key step.
Okay, that covers the tech side. The report also looked at the industry itself, startups, investments, the big manufacturer strategies. What's the vibe there?
The whole sustainability transition is definitely shaking things up. You've got innovative startups popping up, forcing the big established players, the OEMs, to shift their strategies. And it's attracting different kinds of investment into aviation. The last year, April 24 to April 25, saw a continued buzz.
Which startups are really standing out?
Well, we've talked a lot about ZeroAvia and hydrogen propulsion for regional bed, their testing, regulatory progress, those pre-orders, selling components. They're very visible. In S-Fin e-fuels, you've got companies like OXCCU looking at direct CO2 to SAF conversion, Spark e-fuels focusing on PTL. In electric hybrid, Heart Aerospace is pushing ahead with their regional hybrid. Aviation, despite the pause, showed what's possible with all electric. Cormorant Aerospace is doing interesting work on a hybrid amphibious plane.
What about air taxis? Not FFP scope, but relevant.
Definitely shows the pace of innovation. Joby Aviation, for example, is making incredible progress with FAA certification for their eVTOL. They're scaling manufacturing, have aircraft delivered to the Air Force, strong partnership with Toyota, including huge investment. They even flew a hydrogen hybrid variant over 500 miles. While it's urban mobility, their progress in certification and manufacturing is a template.
And novel configurations.
Jet Zero with the BWB is the big one there, especially with that Air Force contract and the EasyJet link.
How are the giants, Airbus and Boeing, navigating this? What are their roadmaps?
They're taking slightly different, though overlapping paths. Airbus, as we said, has that strong long-term bet on hydrogen, focusing on fuel cells for zero, targeting the 2040s. Huge R&D there. Nearer term, it's about efficiency gains on current planes and developing their next single aisle, which might see hybridization and advanced aero around the mid-2030s. They're also active in SAF and eVTOLs.
And Boeing?
Boeing's public emphasis is heavily on SAF as the primary solution for the near and midterm. Goal is 100% SAF capability by 2030. They're really active in trying to build the SAF market investments, partnerships, buying SAF themselves, policy advocacy. They're researching hydrogen and electric too, but tend to stress the infrastructure hurdles more. Near-term efficiency push comes via that truss-braced wing demonstrator, the X-66, still committed to net zero 2050 despite recent financial pressures.
And the engine makers, GE, Rolls, Pratt & Whitney, Safran, they're critical enablers.
Absolutely. They're working on multiple fronts. 1, making current engines even more efficient. 2, making sure they can run safely on 100% to SAF. 3, exploring hydrogen combustion testing components, planning full engine ground tests. Rolls-Royce has been particularly active here with EasyJet, testing combustors on 100% hydrogen, planning liquid hydrogen tests, setting up a dedicated NASA test site. They see potential for H2 combustion in smaller engines from the mid-2030s.
What else are engine makers doing?
Developing hybrid electric systems, often partnering with airframers or on government research programs, and supplying engines and motors for that burgeoning eVTOL and electric aircraft market.
So where is the investment money flowing overall in this transition?
Interesting picture. Direct airline investment in startups is actually pretty low, according to IATA, maybe 7% of members.
No.
Airlines seem focused more on securing SAF and using their venture arms for broader bets on AI or future mobility.
SAF financing.
Getting lots of attention, but still struggling with those cost, risk, and off-take agreement hurdles we talked about. Hard to get large-scale projects funded easily.
Hydrogen.
Investment in the overall hydrogen economy is huge, hundreds of billions globally. But getting the specific, massive, de-risked investment needed for aviation hydrogen infrastructure and scaling is still heavily reliant on policy support.
And electric aviation startups.
They attract venture capital, definitely. But hitting the big funding rounds needed for certification and mass production can be tough, as Eviation's pause showed. The leaders in eVTOL, like Joby, have been more successful, often attracting strategic corporate investment like Toyota's.
So the overall dynamic is complex.
Very. It's diversification, hedging bets. SF is the near-term consensus. Hydrogen and electric are the big long-term potentials, but need fundamental breakthroughs and infrastructure shifts. Startups are pushing boundaries, established players are investing across different options. It really reflects the uncertainty. Major hurdles, tech, economic, policy, remain for all pathways to true net zero long haul.
Okay, let's try and synthesize all this. Looking at the whole picture, what's the outlook for actually achieving zero carbon transatlantic flight? How does all this progress tie back to the Freedom Flight Prize?
Well, if you look strictly at the FFP rules, 100 plus passengers, transatlantic, zero in-flight CO2, rapid turnaround.
Right.
SF is out because it produces CO2. Batteries are out because the energy density just isn't there for the scale. Hybrid electric is out because it still involves fuel burning. Leaving hydrogen, either via fuel cells or direct combustion. That seems the only plausible pathway today that could theoretically meet all the prize criteria in the long run.
And novel designs like BWB.
They help enormously, especially with hydrogen storage and overall efficiency. A BWB might be the enabling airframe for long-haul hydrogen, but it doesn't solve the core propulsion or fuel infrastructure problem on its own, certainly not quickly.
So what are the absolute critical things that need to happen and the biggest bottlenecks right now?
Critical pathway. Get large-scale hydrogen propulsion systems, fuel cells probably first, maybe combustion later, mature, reliable, and scalable to the size needed for a 100-plus seat plane. Integrate them potentially with advanced airframes like BWB.
And the bottlenecks stopping that.
1. Technology maturity and scaling. Getting MW-class fuel cells or engines, lightweight cryogenic tanks, high-power electrics ready for prime time. 2. Green hydrogen infrastructure. Production, transport, liquefaction, airport refueling, a massive global build-out needed and has to be affordable. 3. Economics. Green hydrogen is expensive now. Hydrogen planes will be expensive initially. How do you make it viable? 4. Investment. Trillions needed globally. How do you de-risk it enough for private capital to flow at scale? 5. Regulations. Clear, harmonized international rules for designing, certifying, and operating hydrogen aircraft.
Phew, okay. So realistically, what kind of time frame are we looking at for something like the FFP? And what's its value if, say, 2029 is unlikely?
Realistically, achieving the capabilities needed for the FFP probably aligns more with those OEM timelines for large hydrogen aircraft, think 2040, 2045, maybe even later. And that depends entirely on tackling those bottlenecks.
But the prize itself still matters.
Immensely. Even if it's not won soon, its value is as that crucial long-term driver. It's the North Star, the benchmark for truly zero-emission long haul. It keeps that ultimate ambition visible, pushes people beyond just the easier intermediate steps like SAF, and acts as a catalyst inspiring a lot of the R&D we've discussed.
It certainly feels like a long journey, but potentially a revolutionary one.
Absolutely. The likely path looks something like this. Near term, to 2030. Focus on efficiency, getting newer planes in fleets, scaling up SAF use, maybe seeing the first small electric or hydrogen-electric regional planes enter service.
Midterm, 2030s.
Maybe larger regional hydrogen planes become possible. Advanced concepts for the next generation of single-aisle planes incorporating efficiency gains. We'll see large-scale hydrogen flight demonstrators, start building out initial hydrogen hubs at airports, maybe first niche applications of hydrogen combustion.
And long-term, 2040 plus.
That's when you could potentially see a commercial scaling of large hydrogen aircraft for medium and long haul, the kind of thing the FFP envisions, alongside a very mature and significant SAF market. But getting there faster requires
massive coordinated investment, stable global policies, targeted R&D funding, and a huge expansion of renewable energy.
You summarized it perfectly.
So just to quickly wrap up this deep dive, zero-carbon transatlantic flight. An immense challenge, technically and economically. The Freedom Flight Prize, a vital catalyst, pushing for that ultimate goal, SFF. Crucial now, but not zero emission. Hydrogen, the main long-term contender for the prize. But facing huge tech and infrastructure hurdles. Batteries, not feasible for this scale anytime soon. Novel aircraft like BWB. Potentially key enablers, especially for hydrogen.
And despite the long timescales, it's that sheer ambition of the Freedom Flight Prize that makes it so powerful. It keeps the ultimate destination in view, driving the kind of radical thinking we need.
Okay, here's a final thought for you, the listener, to ponder. Considering everything we've talked about, SAF, hydrogen, electric, maybe something totally new we haven't even imagined yet. Which pathway do you think holds the most realistic promise for genuinely transforming long-haul flight in the decades ahead? And what single biggest breakthrough in tech, infrastructure, policy, whatever, do you believe is most needed to accelerate that vision? Lots to think about. We definitely encourage you to explore the sources further if this has sparked your interest.